Greetings all. Welcome to Aquarian Diary. I'm your host, John Irving. It is September 17th, 2024. It's been a while since I've posted anything here, and there's a whole bunch of good reasons for that. There's been a lot going on in my personal life that I actually would love to be able to talk about, but not quite yet. In some ways, things are still sort of forming, and it's not yet clear enough to me how I would articulate that in a meaningful and appropriate way, but I look forward to that. I've had many very, very interesting and compelling experiences in the past few months. Some of them are quite extraordinary and amazing. But like I said, there's not yet quite a place for me to talk about that here yet. Some very, very interesting things going on. One thing I do want to mention here, though, because I pay quite close attention to certain things, is something that I experienced recently. I've talked a lot here on my channel about the effects and movements of Pluto and how it affects our society and our experiences and reality. It just seems to be something I'm particularly clued into. Pluto went retrograde on May 2nd at 2 degrees of Aquarius. Technically, it retrograded back into Capricorn on September 1st. It will go direct at 29 degrees of Capricorn on October 11th, and Pluto will re-enter Aquarius on November 19th. So basically, Pluto will be in Capricorn from September 1st until November 19th, again going direct on October 11th, technically. Now, the actual precise borders of the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius are somewhat debatable. How do we know exactly what point in space marks the end of one sign and the beginning of another? How do we determine that? How do we evaluate it? And so on. So I had this interesting experience on September 11th, about a week ago, where I felt energetically the shift in my consciousness of Pluto moving from Aquarius back into Capricorn. Now, again, technically, by the math that we're using and the points in space that we're using, that should have occurred on September 1st. But I didn't experience it energetically until September 11th. At that time, Pluto was at 29 degrees, 50 minutes, and 53 seconds of Capricorn. That is when I actually felt the energetic shift. What happened was, over the span of half a day or so, I felt the themes of Pluto in Capricorn come into my conscious awareness quite distinctly. Now, I'm quite sensitive to this because I hated Pluto in Capricorn. I just hated that experience, the energy of it, what was happening for me personally, what was happening in the world, basically bringing the worst dimensions of Capricorn and power and all these petulant, juvenile idiots and their toxic masculinity and all that stuff to the fore were some of the things that I experienced. But the whole time that Pluto was in Capricorn, roughly from 2008 until now, I experienced a lot of anger about what was happening in the world. A tremendous amount of frustration and anger about all of the injustice and depravity politically and socially that we've been experiencing. So I'm very sensitive to those energies. This is in my own personal natal chart, because I have Jupiter and Chiron in Pisces in the 12th. I'm quite energetically tuned into the zeitgeist or the collective consciousness. So when shifts like this occur, I really feel it and I experience it. So the whole time Pluto was in Capricorn, we were dealing with these man-child kind of issues that are, to me, just ridiculous and stupid. And we have all of these people who end up being in very significant positions of power and influence who are just complete jerks. And the rest of us have to kind of put up with it and their idiotic worldviews and things like that. Of course, who am I to judge others? But that is kind of like what we've been experiencing. The worst possible expressions of power and toxic masculinity and patriarchy and unfettered greed and narcissism, corruption, criminal activity, shameless and belligerent ignorance, manipulation, deceit, pathological lying, and all of this just complete nonsense. And I also, at the same time, always intuitively knew for many, many years that I would appreciate the shift of Pluto into Aquarius. And I was very keen on being here on Earth when that happened because I wanted to experience it. We haven't quite completed that cycle yet. We're just about to. Again, technically on November 19th. But if what I experienced energetically at 29/50/53 Capricorn, that would actually be November 10th, if that holds. If my perceptions of the shift of energy hold, then we're actually probably going to be going back into the energy of Pluto and Aquarius a bit sooner than most people think. Now, this is really interesting because my perception of the shift of energy is just based on my own personal experience and observations. So it calls into question, at least for me, about the exact degree at which Capricorn ends and Aquarius begins. Now that has a lot of really fascinating implications because astrology is only theoretical unless it alters our consciousness or perception. Otherwise, it's completely useless if we can't validate that and it doesn't have a material effect upon us. And I thought I would share that just because I thought that was very, very interesting. How could you gauge this? Well, I suppose if you had other people who were energetically sensitive who could contribute to such observations so that you had a pool of people who could validate or verify these kinds of experiences or observations, it'd be a very interesting experiment. Astrology is not just something we read about in books. It is experiential. So being energetically sensitive and aware is very valuable and very important. And that was basically what I wanted to say here today. I have a ton of other things, like I said, that I am anxious to talk about when the timing is right. Some truly, truly fascinating and interesting things that people might think are somewhat outside the scope of what I normally talk about here on my YouTube channel, but to me are extremely important because it is our experience as human beings that we have on this planet in our incarnations that really matter. And those things can't be denied. Ideally, we embrace our experience of being human to the fullest possible extent, as richly and rewardingly as possible. That's just a hint at some of the things I want to talk about. There's a lot of really interesting things going on. The North Node will shift into Pisces on January 11th of 2025 through July 26th of 2026. That's a huge shift, because the eclipses always occur in close proximity to the nodes. And so that's kind of like a phase change or a new chapter. So, you'll want to be paying attention to what houses will be affected by the shift of eclipses. Eclipses can bring major changes to those areas of life, especially if they're conjunct or tightly aspecting significant planets or points in your natal chart. It's also worth noting that the heat will be taken off of Aries and Libra. So those areas are going to settle down quite a bit overall when the nodes shift into Pisces and Virgo. We are in eclipse season right now. And in fact, there's a partial eclipse occurring in Pisces late tonight. There's a Libra solar eclipse on October 2nd and an Aries lunar eclipse on October 17th. The last partial solar Aries eclipse occurs on March 29th. I'll put some of these dates on the screen. They're just too many for me to recite here. So you may want to pay attention to that or pause and have a look at those dates. So this is a very intense period that we're in. I did talk previously about the karmic comeuppance of Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn, clearing up that cycle which began in 2008. Major things are going to occur and shift. And another interesting point I want to make is that I have previously talked a lot about the shift of Pluto into Aquarius. And there might have been a period of time in the spring before Biden dropped out of contention to be the next US president, where people were quite pessimistic about the future and possible outcomes. But since Kamala Harris took the reins, so to speak, there is a tremendous amount of renewed optimism. And I have always said that we will come through without completely slipping into the dark side. That the shift of Pluto into Aquarius was going to take humanity to a new level of consciousness, and that it is linked to the age of Aquarius. So a lot of the things I published here years ago even hold true over time. I know on YouTube there's a tendency for people to just pay attention to everything that is immediate or new or fresh, but a lot of the content I have published here over the past few years has held up extremely well, even if at the time they seemed a bit far-fetched. I'll put a link to some of those in the episode description. Major shifts happening over the next year or two. This is a great time to get an astrology reading if that's something that would interest you. I get to read for some absolutely fantastic and fabulous people. I just did a reading the other day for somebody who is totally impressive and very interesting. And I take a great deal of joy in being able to connect with people of that caliber. They're not huge in number, but they are extremely impressive human beings. And I am very grateful for that and thankful for that. And I would love to do a reading for you too, giving you a bit of a heads up about some of these major shifts that are occurring now and will be for the next couple years. Major stuff. Very exciting. Be prepared for huge shifts, collectively and individually. For more detail, check the episode description for other episodes or articles that are related or that I mentioned. And if you're interested in a reading with me, I'll put a link to that as well. I have a 15% off special on currently. Many sincere thanks to everyone who supports me, especially my YouTube members and astrology clients. Thank you very much. Take care, all the best, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.